I never asked about that. But really, putting the library where the chapel traditionally was.
Chapel and the founding fathers college. Oh my God.
Well, he was a deist.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, that's a radical notion, especially in today's political climate, where these people live under this delusional premise that the founding fathers were Christians.
I asked that question kind of towards the end of last class. How many of you have heard that this is a Christian nation? And I was going through the states and pointing out that Maryland was Catholic. You had pietists in the New England states. You had really they had a sectarian split there. What was the preacher's name? Williams, I think, left. He was kicked out of Boston and went and started Providence. Wasn't his name Williams?
What year was that?
Good question. Pretty sure it's Roger Williams. Roger Williams. And what year was that? He founded Providence in 1636. So, Pilgrim split among them. What's kind of historically crazy is that the founders of the colonies in what would become the United States were individuals that the elite in Europe, mostly England, were glad to get rid of. They were wackos, crazy, starting their own religions,
Now, aren't they?
and in trouble. A lot of them were persecuted by the status quo people in England and had to leave England and went to the Netherlands, where a lot of people could go to the Netherlands because it was kind of a freer society, and then they got the opportunity to go to start their own colony in the New World, and so what you have are a lot of individuals that are not happy in England or in Europe because they're basically starting their own interpretation of Scripture and everything, and that gets them in trouble. You're not allowed to do that, right? And so they were offered the opportunity to found communities in the New World, and so that was a good thing. That was a win-win, really, because that way the king gets colonies that are English. Even New York initially was New Amsterdam. I guess you're all familiar with that. So it was Dutch, but the English bought it, and so it became an English colony, changed to New York. And you end up with these religious groups who are going to found essentially British colonies, right? So the English are happy about that because that's expanding the empire, etc. But at the same time, they're also getting rid of these people who are a pain in the tuchus, right? Because of their crazy ideas. So all these crazy idea folks go and start these colonies, and they're all kind of at odds religiously with one another. And as a result, when you get down to it, Thomas Jefferson has a great idea. Let's separation of church and state. So we don't. So yes, these are all Christians. They're all in disputes with one another. And what's the separation of church and state for? To keep one particular church authority from requiring everyone that wants to be in politics to be a member of that church, because you have so many different churches. Yes, there are also some Jews there, and there are also, are there atheists, I suppose? I'm not sure what an atheist was at the time. But Jonathan Edwards is the one that I'm interested in because of well, he's not only a theologian, he's connected to George Berkeley, and George Berkeley is not only a theologian, but he's a philosopher. So there's the connection. And
Yale College at the age of 13.
well, what was Yale at the time?
Probably.
He probably wasn't
It's probably a
unusual.
barn on someone's land. I don't know.
That's probably one building at
It
the
was in
time.
like the early 1700s, so. Very early.
Well, the library was given to them by George Berkeley. He brought books. George Berkeley came to the colonies. It's not the United States yet, right? He came to the colonies because he convinced the king that the colonies would need a university to train preachers. And he argued that the university, the college, should be in Bermuda.
I wanna go to
No, I
Bermuda.
don't know, but in order, and the king said, "Yeah, go ahead." That's how he got everybody out of there. Yeah, you go do that. And Berkeley went to Providence, Rhode Island, which is, as if any of you know where Bermuda is, that's not the same place. But the neat thing about it was he went there. First, he got married. He hadn't been married, but he thought, okay, if I'm going to go do this, I need a wife. So he got married, and the two of them went and settled in Providence on purpose, with the idea of starting a farm in order to grow enough food that they could send it to the college in Bermuda to feed the faculty and students in Bermuda. So this was step one of founding the college in Bermuda, is go to Providence and wait for the king to send the money. And guess what? The king never sent the money. He cut USAID completely. No, wait, that's contemporary. Sorry. However, so he spent 2 years preaching and starting his farm up and having children, by the way. He and his wife have, I think, 2 children while they're there. And preaching and influencing people, not only theologically, but also philosophically, as you can imagine. He realizes the king isn't sending the money, so he gives up, so he goes back. And there you have it. Jonathan Edwards would eventually become the president of Princeton University. I think it was named something else
He
initially.
was the original founder of the fire and brimstone type preaching. Is that true?
Yes. But it was philosophical at the same time, because they thought, well,
Well, I need the Calvinists had looked that up.
let's go back to this guy, because if we're going to talk about philosophy, Berkeley is a philosopher. He is arguing with John Locke. John Locke, remember I asked you the question, what do you think of Locke's materialism? And the concern was that materialism is going to convince people to become deists, as it did. That's what happened. A lot of them became deists because they figure, okay, so God created everything, but once he did, it was like a clock. Perfect clock, of course. Didn't need any fixing or anything because God made it, right? And since God made it, it's perfect. And so God doesn't actually interfere. God's the creator, the Big Bang, really, if you think of it. But now everything is running perfectly. So there's no need for divine intervention, right? Well, Berkeley is convinced that if you believe that, then you're not going to need God, you're not going to pray to God, you're not going to be religious anymore, and you're going to have atheists. And what will lead people to that is not only the idea that you don't need God, but also that you can't even know things, because you're going to be skeptical, because thanks to John Locke, you can only know the secondary qualities of things, the way things appear to us. We can never actually know the primary qualities, so we actually can't know anything. So we're going to be skeptics. And so we're not only going to be deists, which mean for Berkeley, we're not theists. We're not believing in a personal God, just a big bang. And at the same time, we're skeptical that we can't know anything. So thank you, John Locke. You just totally screwed humanity with your philosophy. So Berkeley argues against John Locke by pointing out that not only did he screw us because of his thinking, but he's also wrong. Has to be, because John Locke is contradicting himself. You can't both say that absolutely the primary qualities are there behind the secondary qualities, but we can't know anything about them. That's just dumb. I mean, because how can you say they are there if we can't know anything about them? That's contradiction, right? So therefore, Berkeley says they are actually not material at all. They're completely spiritual. Spiritual beings. Everything is spirit. No matter. No atoms everywhere that make up everything. Instead, everything is spirit. And in fact, it's the mind of God. And so God is totally in charge of everything. All the laws, everything is actually the mind of God at work. And so you really need God. You have to constantly be in touch with God. You have to be saved. So notice Jonathan Edwards and his preaching tie beautifully in to Berkeley's philosophy. So my question about the argument, which influenced the other, did Berkeley influence Edwards, or did Edwards influence Berkeley? That's actually silly, but it's a real question. There are people in the United States that argue over this, that are kind of like specialists in Jonathan Edwards, and will argue, no, Edwards was clearly the one that came up with the ideas first. That just seems ridiculous to me, because Berkeley arrives already a philosopher. Edwards is just a kid, so what's, where are they coming up with this stuff? There are books out there on it. I think I have some at home, even arguing about who influenced who. But the connection to this fire and brimstone preaching is actually part of the philosophy. So they are philosophical, even though they're also theological. There isn't really that kind of a distinction at this point. I'm not sure that there ever really is a distinction, It's still part of it. If you go to philosophy departments in many of the universities in the United States, they have a philosophy of religion section. We have philosophy of religion courses here, for example. You can take Western religion and Eastern religion. Those are courses that the philosophy department gives. But what do they mean by spirit? Everything is spiritual. Berkeley says everything is spirit and the mind of God. Where does he get that? Well, here's the interesting connection with Leibniz. Leibniz and Berkeley are contemporaries, and they write to one another. In fact, they work together on the subject of calculus. I think I already mentioned that Sir Isaac Newton is actively working on calculus. He calls it fluxions. The word calculus actually comes when he talks about differentials and things. How many folks have studied calculus? All of you? A couple of you. So a lot of the formulas and the symbols are all right out of Leibniz's work, which is kind of cool. Fluxions was what Sir Isaac Newton called it. And I think I mentioned the Calculus Wars, the book